So I wrote some remarks,
Sure,
if that would be
absolutely.
okay, that do indeed express from my vantage point in community. So as a parent, I cannot imagine the pain of knowing my child could and did do something so horrible and that he is gone forever. It is every parent's nightmare, I'm sure. The guilt, remorse, questioning, perhaps anger at Jack's influence, and more would be considered quite natural or normal as emotions that first hit. The issues of gun violence, ease of access to guns, consequences of availability are all tremendously divisive and, for me, depressing topics, as they have no end, no community collective voice, and continue to have huge uneven effects between poor and wealthy communities. Having said all of this, when I thought about the opportunity to be a guest responder about this play, with help from my sister, I decided to use my time in responding to bring what we can think about in terms of Robbie's voice. This is particularly since I have so enjoyed what I've learned from the work with our young women in this community through serving as CEO of Pearls for Teen Girls, as a mother of a young African-American male, as I've worked with youth around academic success, and in my new role as Executive Director of Milwaukee Succeeds. The voice of the student or young person is often not the first, second, or third thing we think about or try to understand in tragic situations such as this. And yet, Andy often throughout the play seeks to relive and understand the moment. The moment, as he says, that started this whole thing. The moment he could have made different personal decisions that could have changed the trajectory of the entire situation. The moment he and Amy made the decision to hand over primary responsibility for Robbie to Amy while Andy went back to work. The moment he decided to buy the gun after Amy was mugged, and on and on. Was the real moment that forever changed Robbie the time he was 5 years old and learned that people do bad, mean things, and as Andy notes, kids can hear what you don't know about being safe and protected? Could this have been the seminal moment for Robbie in terms of his relationship with his dad and his mom? From all outward appearances and norms, Robbie appeared to be a smart, kind, lovable kid who came from a loving two-parent household with healthy relationships with grandparents. Something troubled him deeply, although we are not clear for how long. We know that he experienced nightmares that persisted for some time after Mom was mugged. But from all outward appearances, he continued to lead a quote-unquote normal life. Was Andy's mistake showing Robbie the gun he purchased as a mistaken view that by knowing about the gun, Robbie would feel safe? Is the fact that Robbie is described as a quiet and modest kid revealing of a need to go further in ensuring that Andy and Amy really, truly knew Robbie was okay? No Monday night quarterbacking here. All to say that I reflect on so many situations with our girls and young people in general. The quiet ones need more intentionality and creativity in terms of communications to ensure that what they need is being met and that there are no burning issues or life-altering conclusions being drawn by their silence. Andy says at age 12, it was clear that Robbie was a child unto himself and that there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Is that really true? Or is it the case that communicating with Robbie was challenging and required that the solution to communications challenges had to be worked on and on until resolved? An example from the play is shortly after 9/11, Robbie sitting in the dark in his room watching a documentary about people leaping to their death. While admitting being chilled, Andy's reaction seems to be with himself rather than this being a moment when a gentle probe and conversation might have revealed what was torturing Robbie. Where was his head? And when Caroline shoots Andy, or shoots at him, and the affair becomes public, wasn't it a huge mistake for Andy and Amy to decide to shield Robbie rather than have an open discussion? What effect did having someone so close to Robbie almost die, or maybe he thought he was, have on his thinking about what guns can do? I wonder how many of us walk that fine line Andy describes as all great human beings have at the heart of them this equation. They were loved well, but not over well. They were not zealously observed. For me, with my son, that to this day looks like working so hard for that balance. Inquire, but not too much. Offer availability to talk, since, by the way, did kind of grow up and go through some things. Yet not wanting to risk him going the exact opposite and withholding rather than telling me things that made him scared, that weren't so good, or for which he felt foolish. It is a constant dance, I agree. But honestly, I also know that when our young people do not have open communicative relationships with any adults in their lives, they rely on others for whom they feel a kindred spirit. And while that more often works and is non-threatening, I wonder whether the relationship with Jack is an example of toxic connecting with toxic and no adult healthy communicative relationship resulting in Robbie's decision. Much of Andy's expressed fear in terms of communications with Robbie were from his vantage point, from Andy's vantage point, not Robbie's. Andy didn't want Robbie to shut down. He couldn't bear Robbie hating him. He didn't want Robbie to feel that he wasn't the perfect parent that all of us would like to be. But when you put the child or young person first in your thinking, don't you find the decisions differ about what to do or not to talk about or address? Now, I know this may seem an oversimplification, but for the young people I've worked with and talked to who are shy, quiet, depressed, and or angry, a consistent savior has been that caring adult who that young person trusted, who when push came to shove, was the reason they changed their minds about decisions they would surely regret. So as we think about what we've witnessed and experienced with American Song, let's try to understand with empathy the walk Robbie took and make a decision to ask, to discuss the undiscussable, to probe when it feels like prying, to lovingly turn lemons into lessons so that the fear of talking to us is allayed and we can save a life. We know that based on brain development, Robbie had no clue of the full consequences of his decisions. We can surmise that Robbie was seriously troubled and that a sense of fatality and desperation was at work. We can believe that many people along the way could have done something differently that might have avoided this horrible act. We also hopefully know that our job is not only to passively observe, but to act differently to save the lives of children and young people by taking a closer step towards being that trusted adult who will know when to ask and not assume that all is well.
Thank you, Director Davis. Thank you.